Come on in, friends. We are talking tonight about becoming Bridget. Yes, I said Bridget, becoming Bridget. Someone reminded me that the English version of the name is Bridget. They were like, why are you saying Brigitte? The English version is Bridget. So I'm English, I'm American. So I'm saying Bridget. But come on in, let's talk about becoming Bridget. I have now completed episodes 4 through 6. So I am almost at the end of the series. I have lots of thoughts about becoming Bridget. If you have watched it, let me know. Do a thumbs up if you watched it. Let me know if you have watched it. Well, if you watched Becoming Bridget, say yes in the comments. If you have not watched it, say no. If you don't plan to ever watch it, say never. So let me know if you've watched it, because if you've watched it, I really have some questions. So I am now on episode 6. I started watching Xavier Poussard, the episode on Candace's website, the fuller episode. So on YouTube, there's only like 15 minutes of her interview with him. So I went to her website so I could watch the rest of the interview. I didn't finish, but I probably have about 15 minutes or so left. Um, so it was, I think I'm starting to understand that, especially after watching his interview, because his interview really tracks everything that Candace has been saying. But let me know if you watched it. Let me know if you have not watched it. Let me know if you're never going to watch it. And I got to ask, if you have watched it, do you believe it? Do you not believe it? If you believe it, give us a thumbs up. If you don't believe it, give us a thumbs down. So let us know where you stand on becoming Bridget. Thumbs up, you believe everything Candace is saying. Thumbs down, you don't believe any of what she's saying, or you're unsure. You don't know. So let me know. And if anybody in the comments is from France, let us know. Last time we had someone from France in the comments, and that person had, shared some information with us. Brandon says, not sure I believe it. I think Rainy Garden says not sure. So have you all watched the series? If you are just hearing about it, I can clearly understand why you may be wondering, not sure. But if you have watched it, have you come to a conclusion? Okay, so Brandon, so I only have 2 episodes left to watch. And I'm interested to see what else. I'm going to tell you, episode 5 did surprise me a little bit. So Windmill says complete thumbs down, all the way across, thumbs down. But let me know if what you think. But I'm going to just go ahead and jump into what I have learned in episodes 4 and 5. And also 6, because I have watched 6 also. So Brandon M says, honestly, I think she could be right that we need a birth certificate. So let's see. Hey, Kenny Ken, how can we address Miss Wood? I don't understand your question, Kenny Ken. Well, but let me go ahead and get started telling you what's in episode 4 and 5 and 6. Because I'll say this: Candace is a great storyteller. It's all very interesting. But she begins episode 4 the way she begins all the episodes. She kind of goes through everything she's already told us. So that was a big part of the beginning of the episode. So she still um, has lots of questions about his family, about his background, and that's kind of where we start. So I'm not going to go through all of that. If y'all have specific questions about anything she claims, let me know. But she's I'm not going to say she spends a lot of time on that, but she definitely talks quite extensively about the background. And one of the big revelations in the series was that Emmanuel Macron's mother, who was a pediatrician, she worked for the Social Security office in France. And it turns out that she had been a supporter of transgender and intersex people, and she had assisted people in getting new identities. So that was his mother's background. And I'm going to say allegedly, all of this is allegedly. I'm just telling you what Candace is reporting in her series. So I cannot say this is truth because I don't know. But this is what she's saying. Windmill Cancer is saying intersex people exist. Absolutely. Was this planned for the day she was born? Some of it would have to have been planned as far back as the 1950s. But I digress. Let me get back to what's actually in the series. So she talks about that some more. She said that the mother, Emmanuel Macron's mother, Francois, she gave an interview, a rare interview to an author, and the mother said to the author, Brigitte is not a daughter-in-law. And so Candace asks, what else can she be? And what else can she be if she's not a daughter-in-law? And so it's throughout the series that Candace throws out these questions. She'll say something just like that. Her mother-in-law said she's not a daughter-in-law. Well, what else could she be? Well, some people are going to start thinking, well, what else could she be? Candace must be right. So without saying things explicitly, Candace plants the seeds. And if you don't think through these things yourself, you can end up saying, oh, yeah, Candace, that must be true. Because what other explanation could it be? Maybe the other explanation is when she said, oh, I don't think of Candace as a daughter-in-law. Maybe she thinks of her as a daughter. But, of course, people go to a negative connotation. Yanni says, every time I learn the details about this, I don't know how people take it seriously. Well, people are taking it so seriously. So seriously. I did a live the other day, and there were so many people in the live who were saying, I believe Candace. And in fact, the reason I have a larger platform on TikTok. And so I made a video on TikTok about the defamation lawsuit. because I'm a lawyer. I was very interested in the defamation lawsuits. I made a TikTok about that. It has over 700,000 views and more than almost 4,000 comments. And I was really surprised that there were so many people in the comments saying they believe Candace, that I needed to watch the series to understand. So at that point, I don't think I even knew about the series. So that's how I started watching the series, because everybody was saying you've got to watch the series in order to understand what Candace is talking about, where she's coming from, and why what she's saying is the truth. So that sent me down the road of watching Becoming Brigitte. And I'm now on episodes 4, 5, 6. I just completed those. I only have 2 left to go. So back to episode 4, Candace said that Brigitte was constantly getting things wrong about her own life. So the example she gave is that her sister died in 1960. Candace said she died in 1961. Her niece died after her sister. Candace said, oh, the very next year, my niece died. Well, the niece actually died 6 years later. So that was supposed to be some type of evidence that Brigitte wasn't Brigitte, which I don't quite understand, because they're saying Brigitte is the brother of Brigitte, that Bridget's brother is really Brigitte. So if it's a family member, why wouldn't that family member presumably know the same information? But anyways, that's the information that she gives us. And somebody is asking, are there any records of Brigitte being a female teacher? So I'll talk about that. And somebody's asking me, what do you believe? I'm going to go ahead and say this up front, because I found that after my live was over, people watched parts of my live, and they were like, oh, you believe Candace. I do not believe what I have heard in this series. I have heard very little in this series that I would consider to be factual, that I would consider to be evidence, that I would say could even be presented in a court of law. Now, I did hear something in episode 5 that for me is the most objective information that I've heard. One thing that I heard in episode 5. So I'm going to tell you all what that is. And I'm going to try to bring up, at least on YouTube, I think I can bring up the photo, because I want you all to let me know what you think. So there was one piece of information that Candace shared that to me is the most objective piece of information that I have heard, that I've seen her present. But she starts episode 4. She talks about this claim that Bridget's former first husband, Andre Azur, that immediately before his death, he had been in a psychiatric facility, and he was guarded by a man named Alexander. I didn't write his last name down. And that Alexander had previously been the head of security for Emmanuel Macron. And he had also been his chief of staff. And that Emmanuel Macron had a very close relationship with Alexander. Alexander was 32 years old around this time. And they had such a close relationship that he lived in the Élysée Palace, in the presidential palace. Now, she doesn't say he lived with Emmanuel Macron. She doesn't say anything else about the nature of their relationship, but it leaves a lot to the imagination. So that's how episode 4 kind of starts. She kind of lays out all this information about Alexander and how he got himself in trouble because he dressed as a police officer and he assaulted a woman. And, she just kind of lays out that Emmanuel Macron, the people around him, they are unsavory people. She also talked about the authors that he likes and the other type of people around him who she considers to be PDFs. So, that's a big part of the story, that all these people are PDFs. They are unsavory characters. And that kind of forms this backdrop in this story, but I think it also tells us what the real story is. So we'll see. But she goes on to say that John Michel Trudeau, who is Brigitte's brother, that John Michel Trudeau does exist. So we know John Michel Trudeau, that he exists. We also know that Brigitte exists. Yanni says, I appreciate you because I'm not watching. I told everybody I'm taking this for the team. I'm watching it so you don't have to. So she says this in the series, that John Michel Trudeau, that he exists. And she says that Xavier Poussard has gone through the court processes to try to get pictures of Brigitte. And according to her, they have refused to allow him to get pictures of Brigitte. And apparently in France, after 50 years, like yearbooks and other photos are supposed to go into the public sphere, but they are refusing to allow this information to go in the public sphere. And then this is the big part of episode 4. So this is where it gets very interesting, the way Candace presents it. So she tells this story about a woman named Veronique. I wanted to say Veronica, but it's Veronique. So Veronique was a transgender woman who appeared on television on a French news series, sort of like an Oprah type show in the 1970s. I think it was 1977. And Veronique came out as transgender, but she was in silhouette, she was in shadow, so you could not see her. So we don't actually know who she is, but you could hear her voice. And according to Candace, that voice and the tics that she had in her voice is the voice of Brigitte, and it is the voice, and the tics are the same vocal tics that Brigitte Macron has. So I think she says there had been, I can't remember if she said, she says there had been an AI voice analysis of Veronique, and that it is 100% the same voice of Brigitte. Okay, so for me, that type of statement is what I would consider evidence, or potentially evidence. If you can say, I have done a voice analysis and the voices are 100% the same, then that's something you could take to court, right? Do y'all agree? That's something you could take to court. Now, she says there was an AI voice analysis, but if you were to take something like that to court, guess what? The type of analysis, the person interpreting the analysis, the tools used for the analysis, all of those things would be looked at very critically to make sure it's accurate. And then you could also have people on the other side doing their own analysis and perhaps coming to a different conclusion. But for me, this was like the first time I heard something that kind of amounted to what I would consider evidence. So, what do y'all think about that? An AI voice analysis says that uh, Veronique and Brigitte, they are the same person. Veronique and Brigitte, Veronique, the transgender woman who was on the show in 1977, and Brigitte's voice, according to the AI analysis and according to Candace, it is 100% the same voice of Brigitte. Anybody believes that? What do y'all think? Did anybody thinks that's true? Kate says, I'm from England and curious, how often do people from abroad actually sue in the US? All the time. I'm a lawyer. I have hundreds of lawsuits in my office right this minute. We sue a lot in the United States of America. Absolutely. So just as a little aside, because I'm looking at this comment from Kate from England, and she's like, how much do people sue in the US? So I am a personal injury attorney. So I sue people who have injured my clients through no fault of their own. So sometimes there are people in nursing homes, older people who have been neglected and abused. Sometimes there are car accidents. And my daughter, my oldest daughter, lives in Europe. And she was saying that there, nobody sues for car accidents. If you're in a car accident, too bad, they move on. But here, yes, we file lots of lawsuits. So, okay, so Cool Water 707 is saying no one expects Candace to lay out her full case on the internet. But I have to push back on that, Cool Water, because that's exactly what she has said she's doing, that she has laid it all out in this series. So are you telling us that she has some evidence she hasn't presented in her series? John Smith, did they sue in a Democratic or Republican state? They sued in Delaware, which I believe is a Democratic state. They could have sued her in Tennessee, but they did not. But okay, but I pay. So good point, Yanni. I pay for Gemini Pro, and at the bottom it says Gemini can make mistakes, so double check it. So I thought all AI came with that warning, caution, right? And it's one thing to have an AI voice analysis, but there are people who, for a living, do conduct voice analysis. So they could have paid someone to conduct this voice analysis. So we shall, but I'm talking about what was presented in the show and what is potential evidence. I would say that is potential evidence, not an assumption, not a musing, not a wondering, not a thought, not just a casting and aspersion. That is something that could actually be evidence. And that was the first time in her series that I heard her present something that could actually be evidence. So we have this voice analysis, but get this. So this is 1977. Veronique appears on this show. John Michael Trudeau, the brother of Brigitte, marries a woman named Veronique. Okay, so her brother in 1980 marries a woman named Veronique. So of course, Candace has put 1 plus 1 together and she has 4 because, she is just convinced. Well, she is conveying the story to her audience as though this is not just a coincidence. And she's like, how many coincidences can we have? Uh, so, so that's, I don't know what to make of that. I mean, I have to say it is a coincidence. And this is why I say it's a coincidence. Okay, so he marries a woman named Veronique Drew. There's a marriage certificate of their marriage. Veronique Drew is still alive. Journalists have spoken to her. So even if there was someone who was a transgender on a show in 1977 called Veronique, we know that it's not Veronique Drew. So we know that for sure. And her brother, John Michael, has a child with Veronique Drew named John Jack, who looks like Emmanuel Macron. I don't know if y'all have seen the photos, but they look very much alike. And of course, Candace says that can't be a coincidence. There's no way this guy could, this young man who is Bridget's nephew, no way he just randomly looks like Emmanuel Macron. So she goes on to talk about the fact that Broussard, he has gone through these legal processes trying to get information, but people are refusing to answer basic questions. And while they're trying to push people to sue for defamation. So this is all, part of her spiel that she's talking about. And I mean, she just kind of goes on a tangent about the people in the background. And so she says explicitly in episode 4 that Jean Michel Trigneau is Brigitte Macron. So she is 100% opening herself up to defamation. When she says something like that, she explicitly said Jean Michael Trigneau is Brigitte Macron. So she has explicitly said Brigitte Macron is a man. She has said something that can be proven. And Brigitte Macron filed her lawsuit. She had to understand that she has the burden of proof, that she will be required to prove that what Candace Owens has said is not true. So, so Candace has 100% put herself in a situation where, as we see, she's being sued for defamation. So, and Candace says the only question that she has at this point is what happened to Jean Michel's sister, Brigitte Trigneau. What happened to her? Because it's not the Brigitte Macron that we know today, according to her. So remember, this is all according to her. And it just so happened that that episode was on Jean Michel Trigneau's birthday. So that was episode 5. Honestly, other than the voice analysis, I really didn't get a lot out of that episode. I really didn't get a lot of substance. Like I said, if I was going to court, there was not a lot of information. There were not a lot of facts. There was just not a lot to make me believe that what she's saying is accurate. So let's move on to episode 5. So episode 5, she goes back to the Veronique, the show in 1977. Then the fact that the brother married someone named Veronique. And she talks about the fact that Veronique Drew and Jean Michel, they divorced in 1987. And when Veronique divorced, she's, according to Candace, she classed up, meaning her situation got much better after she divorced. So she apparently married somebody who was, I guess, richer than her former husband. And Xavier Poussard spoke to Veronique, and Veronique said these theories that Brigitte is transgender, that they're crazy, that she doesn't know where this information came from, and that Brigitte told her not to get involved in this stuff, to ignore these people. And Candace thought that was very strange that Brigitte would tell her that. Um, but she thought that was very strange. I'm just reading through my notes. What else? A lot of this is kind of, she is repetitive in what she's saying. Oh, so this is the big deal. So they divorced. Veronique and Jean Michel divorced in 1987. Well, according to Candace, when does Brigitte emerge? Brigitte Macron has a public life starting in 1987, according to Candace. That's when she becomes a teacher. So this is when we now see photos of her. So the photos we have, they're from the late 80s. And she says that before that, there's no record of Brigitte Macron. No record. Although Brigitte Macron has 3 children, she says there's no record of Brigitte Macron before 1987. So she goes on to say that the Macron's real story is fake it, that Emmanuel Macron's real story is that you fake it until you make it. And so she goes on about how Emmanuel Macron, that he is supported and propped up by the Rothschilds. So I'm not going to get into that whole Rothschild stuff, but if you're familiar with the conspiracy theories around them, then that's kind of where she's going. That's where she's going with that. So according to her, people who worked with Emmanuel Macron, they were shocked that he was able to ascend in the bank where he worked. They said he was not smart, that he didn't know anything, and they were shocked that he became a partner, I think a managing partner in that bank. And so what she's saying, at least what I'm taking from it, is that somebody is behind Emmanuel Macron, somebody's trying to prop him up, and he's a puppet for somebody. And that he is some sort of Manchurian candidate. And also she gives us this little tidbit that there is a connection with Jeffrey Epstein. So maybe later on in the subsequent episodes, there's going to be some kind of connection with Jeffrey Epstein. But according to her, the Rothschilds are propping up Emmanuel Macron, and he's not as smart as everybody says he is, and he was just faking it until you make it. but the big surprise, I guess,